Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well. Welcome to Simply Put. Absolutely crazy breaking news just dropped. I'm recording this around 3 p.m., but the news broke slightly earlier this afternoon that Joe Biden will officially be dropping out of the race for the presidency 2024 against Donald Trump. So what I'm going to do is I am going to read over the official letter that he put out, and then kind of walk us through what's going to happen next and just the state of where we are, because this is absolutely insane, unprecedented. I know that word is used constantly, but this is actually unprecedented. So I'm just going to start by reading his letter because it is this is just a historic document that I'm looking at right here. So it says, "My fellow Americans, over the past 3.5 years, we have made great progress as a nation. Today, America has the strongest economy in the world. We've made historic investments in rebuilding our nation, in lowering prescription drug costs for seniors, and in expanding affordable health care to a record number of Americans. We've provided critically needed care to 1 million veterans exposed to toxic substances, passed the first gun safety law in 30 years, appointed the first African-American woman to the Supreme Court, and passed the most significant climate legislation in the history of the world. America has never been better positioned to lead than we are today. I know none of this could have been done without you, the American people. Together, we overcame a once-in-a-century pandemic and the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. We've protected and preserved our democracy, and we've revitalized and strengthened our alliances around the world. It has been the greatest honor of my life to serve you as your president, and while it may have been my intention to seek re-election, I believe it is in the best interest of my party and the country for me to stand down and to focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of my term. I will speak to the nation later this week in more detail about my decision. For now, let me express my deepest gratitude to all those who have worked so hard to see me re-elected. I want to thank Vice President Kamala Harris for being an extraordinary partner in all this work, and let me express my heartfelt appreciation to the American people for the faith and trust you have placed in me. I believe today what I always have. There is nothing America can't do when we do it together. We just have to remember we are the United States of America." All right, well, a lot of platitudes, but the important part of it is that he has decided that it's not in the best interest of the country and the party for him to continue serving as president. One thing that might stick out to you as a bit of an interesting thing is like, all right, well, now what? What are we going to do? And just a few minutes, I think like 10-15 minutes after that tweet with that letter was posted, he posted another tweet that read the following. "My fellow Democrats, I have decided not to accept the nomination and to focus all my energies on my duty as president for the remainder of my term. My very first decision as the party nominee in 2020 was to pick Kamala Harris as my vice president, and it has been the best decision I've made. Today, I want to offer my full support and endorsement for Kamala to be the nominee of our party this year. Democrats, it's time to come together and beat Trump. Let's do this." So, all right, I read the statements, and I mean, there's not too much analysis I could really do besides the fact that this was a big, historic decision. I think Biden's presidency will always be looked at through the lens of the fact that he decided he wasn't going to seek a second term for the good of the country. It did take him a very long time to get here. 3 weeks of just like all these slow leaks and the media just posting all these things and members of Congress coming out against the sitting president saying he shouldn't run again. So truly, truly historic, and we haven't seen anything like it. That being said, I think this is ultimately the right decision, and I know I've been very critical of Biden in the past. And again, I was just critical of the fact that it took him so long to come to this conclusion. But thank God that he did, because Biden had an absolute 0% chance of winning if he stayed at the top of the ticket. But now he has a real shot. If you look at the polls leading up to this, Biden was not only down in every swing state by a margin outside of the margin of error, but there were states that Democrats have won comfortably for 2 decades now that now became toss-ups again, just because of how unpopular Biden was. States like Virginia and New Hampshire that haven't been won by Republicans in a really long time were now in play, which just made him a really weak nominee. So the fact that he was able to finally see all that and then make the decision, all right, I am not going to weigh down not only just the presidency and most likely give it to Trump, but then also weigh down all the Senate candidates who are running as Democrats and all the House members running as Democrats. And even though, so he did endorse Kamala Harris, in that second tweet that I read. And originally there was a lot of concern as, oh, is Biden going to endorse? Because if he doesn't, then that's going to lead to an open convention and like a blitz primary, which if you're not someone who's super familiar with politics, you could probably just guess at how overwhelming and big of a process that would be, especially in like a 1 month window. So I honestly do think that even though there are other people who I think would fare better against Trump, like early voting starts in around 2 months in some states. So the fact that they're going with Kamala, I think, or the fact that Biden's going with Kamala, I would be really surprised if everyone in the party leadership was like, no, we're definitely not going with Kamala. We need someone else. I mean, it is possible that they try to do that, but it would just be so unbelievably messy that I think if for Biden to say, I'm endorsing Kamala, I think everyone is, or mostly everyone, is going to line up behind her, and she is almost certainly now going to be the nominee. So then you probably heard all of this and you're like, what now? All right, Kamala is the nominee. What are we going to do? So I'm going to be basing my assumption, and I'm not saying this with the most confidence, but I'm going to be basing the rest of my what now analysis on the idea that the party is going to coalesce around her, and there isn't going to be an open convention or a blitz primary or all these other crazy things. So the most important thing is now that she's moving from vice president to president, someone needs to fill the VP slot. And the analysis that I've seen online that I typically agree with for a Kamala VP is that it needs to be a straight white guy. And I know what you're thinking, like, why? For the sake of identity, like, identity politics for this. But I think something that we need to factor in is that I think in this current state that this country might be too sexist and racist to have two women or two people of color at the top of a ticket and then have them win. I mean, it totally is possible that wouldn't necessarily be the case. But I think that just based on what we've seen with different voting trends now, I think that's not an unfair gamble to make. So I think, that being said, there are two options that I think are the best options, and these are the names that I'm seeing floated the most as well. So I'm going to talk about these. There are other people like Gavin Newsom or like JB Pritzker, which is the governor of California and Illinois, respectively. But I feel like they're just not as likely as these two people. So option number one is governor of Kentucky, Andy Beshear, because he is a popular blue governor, or Democratic governor, in a very deeply red state. And I feel like choosing someone as like him would really increase the appeal of the ticket, because this is someone who lives in a red state, who knows, who has to interact with a lot of constituents who are red state people, but they still are very overwhelmingly, or not overwhelmingly, but they're still like relatively supportive of him, and he has very strong favorables for a blue governor in a red state. So I think he is one of the top options being considered right now, Andy Beshear. And then second option is Governor Josh Shapiro, who is the governor of Pennsylvania. He is pretty popular at this point. I think I looked at some polling last week. I think his favorables are around 56% favorable, 23% unfavorable, which is really good. Obviously there's a lot of undecideds in that, but still, even if all the undecideds said unfavorable, he would still have a positive favorability. But the most important thing about him, beyond the fact that he's just a relatively popular governor, is that he is a blue governor in the swing state of Pennsylvania. And Pennsylvania is arguably the most important state that Democrats need to win in order to take the presidency. I really don't think there's any electoral map that Democrats can win that wouldn't be just really absurd, where Democrats don't take Pennsylvania. If Trump takes Pennsylvania, I pretty much think the race is over at that point. So having a popular governor from that state, I'm not saying would guarantee the state would go to Kamala, but it would make it almost certainly likely that it would increase the odds in a way that Andy Beshear would possibly not. And then additionally, because Pennsylvania is a Rust Belt state, Michigan and Wisconsin, which are two other states that Democrats pretty much need to win in order to secure the presidency, they may also be more likely to vote for someone who has like a Rust Belt candidate at the in the vice president slot of the ticket. So I think those are the two most viable options. There could obviously be someone else that emerges, like I said, like Gavin Newsom or JB Pritzker, or maybe even Pete Buttigieg or something. But I think the two people that I went into detail about are the most likely ones that we'll see as vice presidents. So now the other thing you're probably thinking about is, all right, great, Joe Biden had no shot. We all know that. but does Kamala Harris actually have a shot? And I think, in my opinion, this is just an objective upgrade for Democrats. Like I said, I think Biden had 0% chance of winning. Kamala, I'm not sure if I'd say she's quite at 50%, but still much closer. I would say it's closer to 50%. Not really sure what the exact range I would give for it is. And even though she is down in some of the polls I'm seeing against Trump, she was polling better than Biden was. And I do also think the fact that she wasn't actually the party nominee makes it so that those like matchup Harris Trump polls weren't exactly the most accurate. And I think now that she is going to be most likely at the top of the ticket, that she will see a minor bump if Democrats coalesce around her and unify, and that she chooses a strong vice president, and they're able to just continue litigating the case against Trump on issues he's unpopular with, whether it's increasing taxes or lowering taxes for the rich or abortion. I could see her getting a minor bump. Again, I don't have a lot of confidence in that, but I think that is a possible outcome. And I think another important factor to keep in mind is that after that first debate, Democratic Party morale was probably some of the lowest it's ever been. There was just no, like, after seeing that performance, which I'm guessing most of you at least saw clips of, it was awful. It was the worst debate performance in presidential history, easy. And I think that now the energy was just so low. So I think the fact that the Democratic Party actually listened to the voters, because I think it was 2/3 of Democrats wanted him to drop out. So the fact that the voters were actually listened to, and now we're getting a much younger candidate who actually has the energy to effectively litigate the case against Donald Trump, I think will increase just the morale. It can increase just the energy to get her elected. And I really think that is, again, a positive for Democrats. Another thing is a lot of donors were pulling money from Biden. They're saying, we're not going to give the Democratic Party another dime as long as he's the nominee. So what now I'm expecting is, now that Kamala is going to almost certainly be the pick, I'm expecting record fundraising numbers from the Democratic Party and her campaign in the coming weeks and months. I think there is just a very strong hunger, I think, for someone who isn't Donald Trump and someone who's just profoundly unlikable in the way that him and Biden were. So the fact that now there's young blood on the ticket, as well as someone who's just different from the matchup that we had 4 years ago, very positive development for the Democrats. And again, like I said, the polls have her down in the swing states now, but I think I'm really interested in seeing what the polling is now that she is almost certainly going to be the nominee. And her favorability numbers are also higher than Biden, so keep that in mind. And then additionally, I think something I did just want to mention, there were actually just two things about versing Trump specifically. You could tell in the Trump team statements that they really did not want this to happen. They thought Biden was so much more beatable, and they were right for thinking that. So now they have to go against someone who's actually able to speak in full sentences, which again is crazy to even have to say. But the fact that now that the leading Democratic nominee can actually do that and litigate the case against him, the Trump team has to completely redo their playbook. I mean, they already probably have been for the last few weeks, but still, they already knew what they were getting in with Biden, and they've been preparing for that for years. But now that Kamala is at the top and they don't even know who the vice president is, they're going to have to do a lot of on-the-fly adapting, which could possibly hurt them if their attacks really aren't sticking. And another point I wanted to mention is that Kamala was a prosecutor earlier in her career, and Trump is a criminal. And I think that if the Democrats really try to position this as like a prosecutor going after a criminal, I think it could make Trump look bad, especially if he's the one who kind of is leading the news with all his negative stories, rather than the news being dominated by how bad of a candidate Biden has been, like it has been for the last month or so. And then one of the other points I wanted to make, I'm just hitting a lot of points right now, is that Biden was the old candidate. Biden was the oldest nominee in the history of this country, and that was a huge weakness for him. But Trump was 78, so he wasn't exactly a spring chicken either. So now Kamala, I believe, is 59. So now if anyone's concerned about age or being old, now what was once a strength for Trump is actually now a weakness, which I think is something that Democrats, if they're smart, will definitely kind of play into and be like, oh, his ideas are outdated, things like that. And I think that the Democrats are going to be able to unify here. And I expect the media and the Democrats to relentlessly go after Trump for a lot of the crazy things that he has said. I know I just threw a lot of information at you, but there are just so many factors at play with this, and this is just a completely new dimension of politics that we have to now consider. But I would say overall, I don't want to say anything too concrete or say anything with too much confidence. I need to see more data. I need to see how this plays out. I need to see how if the Democratic Party immediately coalesces behind her, or if they try to pull something with like a open, like a blitz primary, open convention type of deal, which again I don't think is super likely, but you never know. And again, I kind of mentioned this in the Trump assassination video, but anyone who says anything with complete confidence right now, or complete confidence right now rather, is someone that you shouldn't listen to, because this is just such an unprecedented moment that I think anyone who's really acting as if anything's in the bag right now, just that I don't think that's a voice necessarily worth listening to in this moment. But that being said, we'll see how this plays out. We'll see if the polls shift at all now that Kamala is almost certainly the nominee. And I will continue to keep you posted on this channel. So if you made it to the end, thank you for watching. Consider giving it a like, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.